The anniversary of the October 7th attacks by Hamas on Israel has been marked by a dramatic escalation of violence in the region. Hamas and Hezbollah launched a barrage of rockets into Israel, targeting civilians and infrastructure. Israel responded swiftly with airstrikes and artillery fire on targets in both Gaza and Lebanon. This latest eruption of violence shatters months of relative calm and threatens to plunge the region into a full-blown war. The attacks on this sensitive anniversary serve as a stark reminder of the deep-seated animosity and mistrust that continue to plague the region. The international community watches with bated breath, hoping for a swift de-escalation. The situation remains fluid, with tensions running high on all sides. The coming days will be crucial in determining the trajectory of this latest chapter in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Israel has defended its military response as a necessary measure to protect its citizens from what it describes as indiscriminate attacks by Hamas and Hezbollah. The Israeli government argues that it has a right and a duty to defend its people from terrorism. Israeli officials have pointed to the hundreds of rockets fired from Gaza and Lebanon as evidence of the hostile intentions of these groups. The Israel Defense Forces have stated that their targets are carefully selected to minimize civilian casualties. However, the reality on the ground tells a different story, with reports of civilian casualties and widespread damage. The United Nations has urged all parties to exercise restraint and to respect international law, particularly with regard to the protection of civilians. The escalating violence in Gaza and Lebanon has precipitated a humanitarian crisis of alarming proportions. The relentless bombardment has left a trail of destruction, reducing homes, hospitals, and essential infrastructure to rubble. In Gaza, where over 2 million people are crammed into a densely populated strip of land, the impact of the Israeli airstrikes has been devastating. Hospitals, already overwhelmed by the COVID-19 pandemic, are struggling to cope with the influx of casualties. The relentless bombardment has forced thousands of families to flee their homes, seeking refuge in overcrowded UN shelters. The situation in Lebanon, while not as dire as in Gaza, is also rapidly deteriorating. The international community has pledged millions of dollars in aid to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and Lebanon. Aid agencies are calling for a humanitarian ceasefire to allow for the delivery of essential supplies and medical assistance. The international community has reacted with a mixture of condemnation and concern to the escalating violence between Israel, Hamas, and Hezbollah. The United Nations Security Council held an emergency meeting to discuss the crisis, calling for an immediate ceasefire and a return to dialogue. The United States has expressed support for Israel's right to defend itself but also called for de-escalation. The European Union has condemned the rocket attacks by Hamas and Hezbollah, but also expressed concern about the proportionality of Israel's response. Despite the widespread condemnation of the violence and calls for restraint, a diplomatic solution seems elusive. As the dust settles on the latest round of violence, the question on everyone's mind is, what next? Will this latest eruption of conflict be a catalyst for renewed dialogue or perpetuate the cycle of violence? The deep divisions, historical grievances, and competing narratives make it challenging to find common ground. Despite the formidable obstacles, the need for a just and lasting peace has never been greater. The international community must redouble its efforts to facilitate dialogue and create the conditions for a sustainable peace. Behind the headlines lie the human stories of loss, resilience, and the enduring hope for a better future. In the streets of Gaza and the villages of southern Lebanon, ordinary people are bearing the brunt of this latest chapter in a seemingly endless conflict. Mothers weep for their children, their lives cut short by bombs and bullets. Medical workers, struggling to cope with the influx of casualties, work tirelessly to save lives amidst the chaos. On the other side, Israeli families seek refuge in bomb shelters as sirens wail, warning of incoming rocket fire. The international community must listen to these voices, heed their pleas for peace, and work tirelessly to create the conditions for a just and lasting resolution to this decades-long conflict.